Have you ever wondered why the very people who gave us the Bible, the ones who eagerly awaited the Messiah for centuries, reject Jesus as that promised Savior? It's a question that has puzzled Christians for 2 millennia, and today we're going to unravel this mystery. Picture this, a people chosen by God, given prophecies and promises, waiting for their deliverer, and then, when he arrives, they don't recognize him. It sounds like a plot twist in a divine drama, doesn't it? But this isn't fiction. It's the reality that has shaped religious history and continues to impact our world today. Now you might be thinking, surely it's simple, they just didn't believe. But hold on, because the truth is far more complex and fascinating than you might imagine. We're about to embark on a journey through history, theology, and culture that will challenge your assumptions and deepen your understanding. From the dusty streets of ancient Jerusalem to the vibrant Jewish communities of today, we'll explore the real reasons behind this rejection. And let me tell you, what we're about to uncover might just change the way you view not only Jewish-Christian relations, but also your own faith. So fasten your seatbelts, open your minds, and prepare your hearts. We're about to dive deep into one of the most intriguing religious mysteries of all time. By the end of this video, you'll have insights that few Christians have ever considered, and you'll be equipped with understanding that can bridge gaps and foster dialogue. Are you ready to have your perspective transformed? Let's begin this eye-opening exploration of why the Jewish people reject Jesus as the Messiah. Trust me, the reasons will surprise you, challenge you, and ultimately enrich your faith in ways you never expected. To truly understand why the Jewish people reject Jesus as the Messiah, we need to journey back in time to the bustling streets of ancient Israel. Imagine yourself there, amidst the noise of the marketplace, the smell of spices, and the fervent discussions about the promised Messiah. It's a world far removed from our own, yet it holds the key to our question. In those days, the air was thick with anticipation. The Jewish people had endured centuries of oppression, from the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, and now the iron fist of Rome. They clung to the promises found in their sacred scriptures, promises of a deliverer who would restore their nation to its former glory. But what exactly were they expecting? This is where things get interesting. The messianic expectations of ancient Israel were far more complex and nuanced than many of us realize today. They weren't looking for a spiritual savior in the way we understand Jesus. No, their hopes were set on a very different kind of Messiah. Picture a warrior king, a descendant of David, riding in on a war horse, sword in hand. This Messiah was expected to overthrow the oppressors, re-establish the Davidic dynasty, and usher in an era of peace and prosperity for Israel. As the prophet Isaiah declared, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders." Isaiah 9:6. But it wasn't just about political liberation. The Messianic age was also supposed to bring about a spiritual revival. The prophet Jeremiah spoke of a time when God would make a new covenant with his people, writing his law on their hearts. Jeremiah 31:31-33. The people expected a restoration of temple worship and a return of the exiles from all corners of the earth. Now here's where it gets really fascinating. These expectations weren't just wishful thinking. They were deeply rooted in centuries of prophecy and tradition. The Jewish people had carefully studied and interpreted their scriptures, developing a rich tapestry of messianic thought. For instance, they looked to passages like Daniel 7:13-14, which speaks of one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven and being given authority over all peoples. They pondered over Zechariah 9:9-10, which describes a king coming to Jerusalem, righteous, and having salvation riding on a donkey. But here's the kicker, and this is crucial to understanding the Jewish rejection of Jesus. These prophecies were often interpreted in light of their current circumstances. Under Roman oppression, the idea of a conquering Messiah who would restore Israel's political autonomy was particularly appealing. So when Jesus appeared on the scene, preaching a message of spiritual redemption rather than political revolution, it's not hard to see why many were skeptical. His approach didn't align with the prevailing messianic expectations of the time. This historical context is vital because it shows us that the Jewish rejection of Jesus wasn't born out of stubbornness or blindness. It was rooted in centuries of carefully developed theological understanding and fervent hope for national restoration. Let's dive into the heart of the matter, the theological chasm that separates Jewish and Christian interpretations of messianic prophecies. This divide is not just a matter of differing opinions, it's a fundamental divergence in how we read and understand the same sacred texts. Imagine you're holding an ancient scroll, its parchment weathered by time. The words inscribed on it are the same whether you're a Jew or a Christian, but the meaning you derive from them could be worlds apart. This is the crux of our theological divide. Take for instance the famous prophecy in Isaiah 7:14. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel. As Christians, we immediately connect this to the miraculous birth of Jesus. But from a Jewish perspective, this verse has a completely different context and meaning. In the original Hebrew, the word translated as virgin is alma, which more accurately means young woman. Jewish scholars argue that this prophecy was fulfilled in Isaiah's time, referring to a contemporary event rather than a future Messiah. They see it as a sign given to King Ahaz about the downfall of his enemies, not a prediction of a virgin birth centuries later. Now let's look at another crucial prophecy, the suffering servant described in Isaiah 53. Christians view this as a clear foretelling of Jesus' sacrificial death. However, Jewish interpretation sees this passage as a metaphor for the nation of Israel, enduring suffering for the sake of the world. These differing interpretations extend to numerous other prophecies. Micah 5:2, which Christians see as predicting Jesus' birth in Bethlehem, is understood by Jews as referring to the Messiah's ancestral lineage, not necessarily his birthplace. Zechariah 12:10, they will look on me, the one they have pierced, is read by Christians as a prophecy of the crucifixion, while Jews interpret it in the context of national mourning. But it's not just about individual verses. The entire concept of what the Messiah should be and do differs significantly. Jewish tradition expects the Messiah to fulfill certain criteria: gathering the Jewish exiles, rebuilding the temple, bringing world peace, and spreading universal knowledge of God. From their perspective, Jesus did not fulfill these requirements. Moreover, the idea of a suffering Messiah who dies for the sins of others is foreign to traditional Jewish thought. In Jewish theology, each person is responsible for their own sins, and repentance and good deeds are the path to forgiveness. The Christian concept of vicarious atonement through Jesus' death is a major stumbling block. Another significant divide lies in the understanding of the Messiah's nature. Christianity's belief in Jesus as both fully God and fully man contradicts the Jewish conception of an indivisible, non-corporeal God. The idea of God becoming flesh is seen as incompatible with Jewish monotheism. It's crucial to understand that these aren't just academic disagreements. They represent deeply held beliefs rooted in centuries of scholarship and tradition. For many Jews, accepting Jesus as the Messiah would mean reinterpreting their entire scriptural and cultural heritage. This theological divide reminds us of the complexity of faith and interpretation. It challenges us to approach our own beliefs with humility, recognizing that the same words can be understood in profoundly different ways depending on one's background and tradition. When we talk about why Jewish people reject Jesus as the Messiah, we're not just dealing with ancient texts and theological debates. We're stepping into the realm of identity, a powerful force that shapes beliefs, behaviors, and entire cultures. To truly understand this rejection, we need to appreciate the deep-rooted Jewish identity that has been forged through millennia of history, tradition, and often adversity. Imagine for a moment that you're part of a people who have maintained their distinct identity for over 4,000 years. Despite being scattered across the globe, despite facing persecution and attempts at forced conversion, you've held on to your beliefs, your customs, your very essence. This is the reality for the Jewish people. Their identity isn't just a label, it's a living, breathing part of who they are. At the core of this identity is the concept of being God's chosen people, as we read in Deuteronomy 7:6, "For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on the face of the earth to be his people, his treasured possession." This chosenness comes with a sense of responsibility, to be a light unto the nations and to uphold God's laws. Now consider how accepting Jesus as the Messiah might impact this identity. For many Jews, embracing Jesus isn't just about changing religious beliefs. It's perceived as a fundamental shift in who they are. It's seen as stepping away from the very community and heritage that has defined them for generations. Moreover, Jewish identity is deeply intertwined with practice and observance. The Torah commands 613 mitzvot or commandments, covering everything from dietary laws to Sabbath observance. These practices aren't just religious rituals, they're the fabric of daily life, family traditions, and community bonds. Christianity, with its focus on faith rather than law, represents a significant departure from this way of life. And there's also the historical context to consider. For centuries, Jews faced pressure to convert to Christianity, often under threat of persecution or death. This has left deep scars on the collective Jewish psyche. Accepting Jesus can be seen as a betrayal of ancestors who sacrificed everything to maintain their faith and identity. Furthermore, the Holocaust, a tragedy still within living memory for many, has intensified the need to preserve Jewish identity. In the face of near annihilation, many Jews feel a profound responsibility to ensure the continuation of their people and traditions. Embracing a faith that has historically been associated with their persecutors can feel like a betrayal of this responsibility. It's also worth noting that Jewish identity isn't solely religious. For many, being Jewish is as much about culture, ethnicity, and shared history as it is about belief. Even secular Jews, who may not practice religion, often feel a strong connection to their Jewish heritage. Accepting Jesus can be seen as severing these cultural and familial ties. In Jewish communities, there's often the saying, "To be a Jew means to say we and not I." This collective identity is powerful. It provides a sense of belonging, a framework for understanding the world, and a connection to something greater than oneself. The idea of stepping away from this collective identity to embrace a faith that emphasizes personal salvation can be deeply challenging. Additionally, the concept of messianic redemption in Jewish thought is tied to national restoration and universal peace. The personal salvation offered by Christianity can seem at odds with this communal vision of redemption. Understanding these cultural and social factors helps us see that the Jewish rejection of Jesus isn't just about theological disagreements. It's about preserving an identity that has survived against incredible odds, an identity that provides meaning, community, and a sense of purpose. To truly understand why many Jewish people reject Jesus as the Messiah, we must confront a dark and painful chapter in history, the long legacy of persecution that the Jewish people have endured, often at the hands of those who claimed to follow Christ. This history isn't just a series of isolated incidents. It's a trauma that has been woven into the very fabric of Jewish identity and collective memory. Let's take a journey through time, starting in the early days of Christianity. Initially, the followers of Jesus were seen as a Jewish sect, but as Christianity spread and became the dominant religion in the Roman Empire, tensions began to rise. By the 4th century, with Christianity as the official religion of Rome, Jews found themselves increasingly marginalized and persecuted. Picture yourself in medieval Europe. The Crusades, launched to reclaim the Holy Land, resulted in massacres of Jewish communities. The First Crusade in 1096 saw the destruction of Jewish communities in the Rhineland. Crusaders on their way to Jerusalem turned their swords on local Jewish populations, giving them the choice of conversion or death. Thus forward to 1215, when the Fourth Lateran Council decreed that Jews should wear distinctive clothing to set them apart. This marking of Jews became a common practice across Europe, stigmatizing them and making them targets for violence. The Spanish Inquisition, beginning in 1478, led to the expulsion or forced conversion of hundreds of thousands of Jews. These weren't isolated incidents. Throughout Europe, Jews faced blood libels, false accusations of using Christian blood in religious rituals. These libels often led to mob violence and massacres. In 1349, as the Black Death swept through Europe, Jews were scapegoated and accused of poisoning wells, leading to widespread persecution and the destruction of hundreds of Jewish communities. The Reformation, while challenging many aspects of the Catholic Church, didn't end anti-Semitism. Martin Luther, initially hoping to convert Jews, later wrote virulently anti-Semitic tracts when they refused to accept his teachings. His words were later used to justify persecution in Protestant lands. This pattern of persecution continued into the modern era. In Tsarist Russia, Jews faced restrictive laws and violent pogroms. And then came the Holocaust, the most systematic attempt to eradicate the Jewish people in history. 6 million Jews were murdered by the Nazi regime and its collaborators, many of whom claimed Christian backgrounds. Now you might be thinking, but that was then, surely things are different now. And yes, there have been significant improvements in Jewish-Christian relations, especially since the Second Vatican Council in the 1960s. Many Christian denominations have officially repudiated anti-Semitism and sought reconciliation. However, the scars of history run deep. For many Jews, Christianity is inextricably linked with centuries of persecution. The cross, a symbol of salvation for Christians, has often been a symbol of terror for Jews. This historical trauma creates a significant barrier to accepting Jesus as the Messiah. Moreover, this history of persecution has reinforced the importance of maintaining Jewish identity and community. Accepting Jesus can be seen as aligning oneself with a group that has historically sought to destroy or forcibly convert Jews. It's crucial to understand that this isn't about holding modern Christians responsible for the actions of their ancestors. Rather, it's about recognizing how this painful history shapes perceptions and reactions. For many Jews, rejecting Jesus isn't just about theology. It's about honoring the memory of ancestors who suffered for their faith and preserving an identity that has survived against incredible odds. This historical perspective challenges us to approach Jewish-Christian dialogue with sensitivity and humility. It reminds us of the power of actions to shape beliefs and the long-lasting impact of historical trauma. As we step into the present day, it's important to recognize that Jewish perspectives on Jesus have evolved. While the traditional rejection remains predominant, there's a spectrum of views that reflect the diversity of modern Jewish thought and the changing dynamics of interfaith relations. Let's start with the mainstream view. For most observant Jews, Jesus is seen as a historical figure, a Jewish teacher who lived in the 1st century CE. They might acknowledge his influence on world history, but they don't accept his divinity or his role as the Messiah. Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, a prominent modern Jewish thinker, encapsulates this view. Jews don't accept Jesus as the Messiah because he didn't fulfill the messianic prophecies. However, there's a growing recognition of Jesus as a Jewish figure. Many Jewish scholars now study Jesus in his historical Jewish context. For instance, Amy Jill Levine, a prominent Jewish New Testament scholar, has done extensive work on understanding Jesus within his Jewish milieu. This academic interest doesn't equate to religious acceptance, but represents a willingness to engage with Jesus as part of Jewish history. Some liberal Jewish thinkers have gone further. Rabbi Michael Lerner, editor of Tikkun magazine, has suggested that while Jews shouldn't accept Jesus as God or Messiah, they can appreciate him as a Jewish teacher who spread ethical monotheism. He argues that Jesus' teachings on social justice align with Jewish values. Then there's the perspective of secular Jews, who might view Jesus purely through a cultural or historical lens, without religious implications. For them, Jesus might be seen as an influential historical figure, much like other important personalities in world history. It's also worth noting the existence of Messianic Judaism, a movement that combines Jewish identity with belief in Jesus as the Messiah. However, it's important to understand that mainstream Judaism does not recognize this as a form of Judaism, viewing it instead as a form of Christianity. In recent years, there's been increased interfaith dialogue between Jews and Christians. This has led to greater mutual understanding, with some Christians gaining a deeper appreciation of Jesus' Jewish roots, and some Jews reconsidering long-held assumptions about Christianity. However, it's crucial to understand that these evolving perspectives don't negate the fundamental theological differences. The vast majority of Jews, regardless of their level of observance, do not accept Jesus as the Messiah or as a divine figure. The reasons we've discussed in previous sections, theological interpretations, cultural identity, and historical experiences, continue to shape this stance. Moreover, many Jews express concern about Christian missionary efforts directed at Jews, seeing them as disrespectful of Jewish identity and beliefs. Organizations like Jews for Judaism actively work to counter these efforts and provide resources for Jews to respond to Christian evangelism. At the same time, there's a growing emphasis in some Jewish circles on distinguishing between accepting Jesus' teachings and accepting him as a divine figure or the Messiah. As Rabbi Irving Greenberg puts it, Jews can respect Jesus as a teacher of ethics without accepting the Christian theological claims about him. It's also worth noting that in Israel, where Judaism is the majority religion, perspectives on Jesus can be quite different from those in diaspora communities. There's often less emotional charge around the topic, and more willingness to engage with Jesus as a historical figure. These modern perspectives reflect the complexity of Jewish identity in the 21st century. They show us that while the core rejection of Jesus as Messiah remains, the conversation around Jesus in Jewish thought is nuanced and evolving. Understanding these modern perspectives is crucial for fostering meaningful interfaith dialogue and mutual understanding between Jews and Christians. It reminds us that views can change over time, even as fundamental beliefs remain constant. As we conclude our exploration of this topic, we see that the Jewish rejection of Jesus as the Messiah is a complex issue rooted in theology, history, culture, and identity. It challenges us to approach interfaith discussions with respect, empathy, and a willingness to understand diverse perspectives. As we've journeyed through the complex landscape of Jewish perspectives on Jesus, we've encountered theological differences, historical traumas, and deeply rooted cultural identities. Now let's explore how we can use this knowledge to foster understanding and respect between Jewish and Christian communities. First and foremost, it's crucial to approach this topic with humility and openness. Both Jews and Christians need to recognize that their own perspective is not the only valid one. As the ancient Jewish sage Hillel said, "That which is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. That is the whole Torah. The rest is the explanation. Go and learn." Education is key. Christians seeking to understand their Jewish neighbors should take the time to learn about Jewish history, theology, and culture. This doesn't mean abandoning one's own beliefs, but rather gaining a deeper appreciation for the Jewish perspective. Similarly, Jews can benefit from understanding Christian theology and the diversity within Christianity. Interfaith dialogue programs have proven effective in building bridges. These forums allow for honest, respectful conversations about differences and commonalities. The Vatican's Commission for Religious Relations with the Jews and various local interfaith councils are examples of initiatives fostering such dialogue. It's important to move beyond tolerance to genuine respect. This means not just accepting the other's right to their beliefs, but truly valuing the richness of their tradition. As Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, former chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, often emphasized, the test of faith is whether I can make space for difference. For Christians, this might mean reconsidering how they approach evangelism to Jews. Instead of seeing Jewish rejection of Jesus as a problem to be solved, it can be viewed as an opportunity to deepen one's own faith through engagement with a different perspective. As Pope Francis has stated, dialogue and friendship with the Jewish people are part of the life of Jesus' disciples. For Jews, it might involve distinguishing between historical Christian anti-Semitism and modern Christians who genuinely seek understanding and friendship. It could also mean being open to learning about Christianity without fear of compromising one's own identity. Both communities can focus on shared values and common goals. Judaism and Christianity both emphasize ethical monotheism, social justice, and the dignity of human life. Collaborating on social issues, fighting poverty, promoting peace, protecting the environment, can build bonds that transcend theological differences. It's also crucial to address anti-Semitism and other forms of religious bigotry head-on. Christian leaders have a responsibility to educate their communities about the harmful legacy of anti-Semitism and to actively combat it. Jewish leaders, in turn, can acknowledge positive changes in Christian attitudes towards Jews and Judaism. In academic settings, courses on comparative religion and joint study programs can promote understanding. Initiatives like the Center for Jewish-Christian Understanding and Cooperation in Israel are pioneering such efforts. On a personal level, building genuine friendships across religious lines can be transformative. Sharing meals, celebrating each other's joyous occasions, and offering support in times of difficulty can create bonds that overcome theological divides. It's important to remember that understanding doesn't require agreement. Jews and Christians can maintain their distinct beliefs while still respecting and learning from each other. As the Jewish philosopher Martin Buber wrote, "The real dialogue is one in which each of the partners, even when he stands in opposition to the other, heeds, affirms, and confirms his opponent as an existing other." Lastly, both communities can embrace the concept of holy envy, the ability to admire and learn from the strengths of another's faith tradition without abandoning one's own. This approach, advocated by scholars like Krista Stendahl, can enrich both faiths. In conclusion, bridging the gap between Jewish and Christian perspectives on Jesus requires patience, empathy, and a willingness to engage with different viewpoints. It's not about erasing differences, but about creating a space where those differences can coexist peacefully and even enrich our understanding of faith and human experience. By fostering understanding and respect, we not only honor our own traditions, but also contribute to a more harmonious world. As the prophet Micah declared, "And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." In this spirit of justice, mercy, and humility, we can build bridges of understanding that span even the widest theological divides.